Great leaders don't yell. They speak and the world listens. Introduction.
Every era is shaped by voices. Not the loudest, but the most precise. The ones that command without shouting, inspire without begging, and move crowds with nothing but clarity and conviction. In a world overflowing with noise, those who learn to speak with purpose rise above it all. This book is not about charisma you're born with. It's about the language you can master. The tone, the rhythm, the silence between your words. It's about speaking so people don't just hear you, they follow you. Dr. Julian Vance is with you. Chapter 1. The Power of Presence. Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the most compelling one. True leaders understand that their influence begins the moment they enter a space, long before they utter their first word. In a world saturated with noise, the leaders who truly captivate and inspire are those who have mastered the art of presence. This chapter will transform how you show up in every room, every meeting, and every conversation for the rest of your life. The moment you decide to become a leader, everything changes, and I mean everything. Your relationship with rooms shifts. Your understanding of silence deepens. Your awareness of every micro-movement your body makes becomes heightened. Because here's what most people don't realize. Leadership is not a title you earn or a position you're given. It's a presence you cultivate, and that cultivation begins with understanding that every single person in every single room is unconsciously asking the same question about you within the first 7 seconds of seeing you. Should I listen to this person? Your answer to that question isn't delivered through your words. It's delivered through your presence. And presence is the invisible force that separates true leaders from everyone else who's simply trying to get by. Think about the last time you were in a meeting where someone walked in late. Did you notice how the entire energy of a room shifted? Not because of what they said, but because of how they entered. Did they slink in apologetically, shoulders hunched, mumbling an excuse while avoiding eye contact? Or did they stride in with purposeful calm, acknowledging their lateness with a brief nod while maintaining their composure? The difference between these two entrances isn't just about confidence. It's about understanding that leadership begins with your relationship to space, and space responds to intention. When you walk into a room with unclear intention, the room reflects that confusion back to you through distracted conversations, wandering attention, and the subtle but unmistakable feeling that you're fighting for relevance rather than commanding it. But here's where it gets fascinating. Presence isn't about dominance or intimidation. It's about gravitational pull. Think of the most magnetic leaders you've encountered in your life. I guarantee they weren't the ones who walked in demanding attention through volume or dramatic gestures. They were the ones who walked in and somehow made the room more focused, more intentional, more alive. They understood that true presence is like turning up the resolution on a television screen. Everything becomes clearer, more defined, more engaging. This happens because authentic presence creates what psychologists call embodied authority. The kind of influence that doesn't need to announce itself because it's felt at a cellular level by everyone in your vicinity. Your body language is speaking a language that's older than words, more primal than logic, and more influential than any argument you could craft. Right now, as you're reading this, your posture is communicating something about your relationship to this material. Are you leaning in with curiosity, or are you slouched with skepticism? Are your shoulders relaxed with openness, or tense with resistance? Your body is having a conversation with this chapter, and that same conversation is happening every moment you're in the presence of other people. The difference is that most people are unconscious of this dialogue, while leaders have learned to become fluent in it. When you master your physical presence, you're not manipulating people. You're aligning your external expression with your internal intention, and that alignment creates the kind of authenticity that draws people in rather than pushing them away. Let's talk about the revolutionary power of stillness, because this might be the most counterintuitive leadership principle you'll ever encounter. In a culture that celebrates the squeaky wheel, the constant networker, and the always-on achiever, the leader who has mastered stillness possesses something that feels almost supernatural. the ability to make their presence felt through strategic absence of action. Watch a master conductor during a symphony's most delicate passage. They're not frantically waving their baton. They're holding space with such precise stillness that every musician feels guided by their restraint. This is what I call pregnant pause leadership. The understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is create space for others to step into. When you rush to fill every silence, interrupt every pause, or react to every provocation, you're training people to see you as reactive rather than responsive, and reactive energy never commands respect the way responsive energy does. Your tone of voice is the bridge between your internal world and external influence, and most people completely underestimate its power to shape reality. Think about this. The same words, "I need to talk to you," can create anticipation or anxiety, curiosity or dread, depending entirely on the tonal landscape they're delivered through. Leaders understand that tone isn't just about how something sounds, it's about how something feels. When your tone is aligned with calm authority, people experience your words as guidance rather than demands, wisdom rather than opinions, and invitations rather than obligations. This happens because your tone carries what neuroscientists call emotional contagion, the unconscious transmission of feeling states from one person to another. When your tone is rooted in centered calm, rather than anxious urgency, you're literally teaching everyone around you how to feel in your presence. And that teaching is happening below the level of conscious awareness. But here's the secret that separates good leaders from extraordinary ones. They understand that presence isn't performed, it's embodied. You can't fake your way into authentic presence, because presence emerges from your relationship with yourself, and that relationship shows up in 1,000 micro-expressions that your conscious mind can't control, but others will unconsciously perceive. When you're trying to project confidence while feeling insecure, people sense the disconnection. When you're attempting to appear calm while feeling chaotic, the incongruence creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance in observers. They know something's off even if they can't name what it is. This is why the most powerful presence work happens internally first. You must become comfortable with who you are in silence, in solitude, in the spaces between your thoughts, because that's where your authentic presence lives, and authentic presence is the only kind that creates lasting influence. The science behind presence is absolutely fascinating and completely validates what great leaders have intuitively understood for centuries. Researchers have discovered that when someone embodies authentic presence, their heart rate becomes more coherent, creating what's called heart-brain coherence that others can actually sense and synchronize with. This means that when you walk into a room in a state of calm, centered presence, you're not just affecting the energy, you're literally offering others a more coherent physiological state to match. This is why some people seem to have a calming effect on chaotic situations without saying a word, while others seem to amplify tension simply by arriving. Your nervous system is constantly broadcasting your internal state, and everyone around you is unconsciously tuning into that broadcast. When you learn to regulate your own internal state, you become what systems theorists call a calm center that others naturally organize around. Now let's address the elephant in every room, the difference between presence and performance. So many people mistake leadership presence for putting on a show, creating a persona, or adopting behaviors that feel foreign to their natural temperament. This approach always fails because it requires tremendous energy to maintain, creates internal stress that others can sense, and ultimately feels hollow to both the performer and the audience. Authentic presence is the exact opposite. It's about removing the masks, dropping the performance, and showing up as the most centered, grounded version of yourself. This doesn't mean being passive or laid back. It means being fully present to what the moment requires while remaining connected to your core self. The most magnetic leaders I've studied share this quality. They seem to be exactly who they are, only more so. They haven't created a leadership persona. They've refined their authentic self until it naturally commands attention and respect. The relationship between silence and authority is one of the most profound aspects of presence that most people completely misunderstand. In our noise-saturated culture, we've been conditioned to believe that the person talking the most is the person with the most value to offer. But leaders understand that strategic silence creates space for wisdom to emerge. When you're comfortable with silence, you give others permission to think more deeply, speak more thoughtfully, and connect more authentically. Your silence becomes an invitation for others to fill the space with their best thinking rather than their reactive responses. This is why the most powerful question a leader can ask is often followed by their willingness to wait. Really wait for a thoughtful answer. That waiting communicates something profound. That you believe the person you're speaking with has something valuable to offer, and you're willing to create space for that value to emerge. Let me share something that might revolutionize how you think about walking into rooms. Every entrance is an opportunity to raise the consciousness of everyone present. This isn't about making a grand entrance or drawing attention to yourself. It's about understanding that your quality of presence affects the quality of thinking, feeling, and being of everyone around you. When you enter a space grounded in your purpose, centered in your body, and clear in your intention, you're offering everyone else an opportunity to become more grounded, centered, and clear themselves. This is what I call presence leadership. The understanding that your primary job as a leader isn't to have all the answers or make all the decisions. It's to create the kind of space where everyone's highest thinking can emerge and everyone's best contributions can be offered. The mastery of micro-expressions is where presence work becomes truly sophisticated. While you're learning to manage the obvious aspects of body language, posture, gestures, facial expressions, your unconscious mind is constantly broadcasting subtle signals that others pick up on without realizing it. The slight tension in your jaw when you're frustrated, the micro flinch when someone challenges your idea, the barely perceptible shift in your breathing when you feel uncertain. These tiny expressions are constantly shaping how others experience your leadership. The most powerful leaders have developed what I call micro-awareness, the ability to notice and adjust these subtle expressions in real time. This isn't about becoming artificial or controlled. It's about becoming conscious of the full spectrum of your communication, so you can ensure your nonverbal message aligns with your verbal intention. Here's something most leadership development programs completely miss. Presence is deeply connected to your relationship with time. Leaders who command attention understand that they exist in what philosophers call vertical time, moments of depth and meaning, rather than just horizontal time, the mechanical progression of minutes and hours. When you're fully present, you create what others experience as timelessness, where moments feel rich and meaningful rather than rushed and superficial. This is why some 5-minute conversations with certain leaders feel more valuable than hour-long meetings with others. The leader who has mastered presence isn't just managing their schedule. They're curating the quality of time they create for others to step into. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to slow down the frenetic pace of modern life and create space for the kind of deep connection and clear thinking that produces breakthrough results. The connection between breath and presence is so fundamental that it's almost embarrassing how little attention most leadership training pays to it. Your breath is the bridge between your conscious and unconscious mind, your internal state and external expression, your personal energy and your ability to influence others. When your breathing is shallow and rapid, you're broadcasting anxiety, urgency, and stress, and everyone around you unconsciously begins to match that pattern. When your breathing is deep and steady, you're creating an anchor of calm that others can unconsciously synchronize with. The most powerful leaders have learned to use their breath as a leadership tool, consciously deepening and slowing their breathing before important conversations, during tense moments, and whenever they want to shift the energy of a group. This isn't new age nonsense. This is practical neuroscience applied to leadership effectiveness. Let's talk about the courage required to embody authentic presence, because this is where most people stop short of their full leadership potential. True presence requires what I call radical authenticity. The willingness to show up as exactly who you are, including your uncertainties, your learning edges, and your humanity. This feels risky because we've been conditioned to believe that leadership means having all the answers, never showing weakness, and maintaining a perfect facade. But here's what I've discovered in working with thousands of leaders. The ones who try to appear perfect lose credibility, while the ones who show up authentically human while maintaining their groundedness and clarity create the kind of trust that transforms organizations and relationships. Authentic presence isn't about being vulnerable for vulnerability's sake. It's about being real while remaining centered, honest while maintaining authority, and human while embodying wisdom. The role of intuition and presence cannot be overstated, yet it's rarely discussed in leadership development contexts. When you're fully present, not lost in thoughts about the past or anxieties about the future, you gain access to what researchers call embodied cognition, a way of knowing that integrates information from your entire nervous system rather than just your analytical mind. This expanded awareness allows you to sense the unspoken dynamics in a room. Feel when someone has something important to say but hasn't found their voice yet, and know when a group is ready to move from discussion to decision. Leaders who have developed this intuitive presence don't have mystical powers. They've simply learned to pay attention to the full spectrum of information available in any moment, including the subtle, energetic information that most people ignore. This makes them seem almost psychic in their ability to read situations and respond appropriately. Your relationship with mistakes and imperfection directly impacts your presence in ways that most people never consider. When you're terrified of making errors, saying the wrong thing, or appearing less than perfect, that fear creates a subtle but perceptible tension that others unconsciously register as insecurity or inauthenticity. Leaders who embody powerful presence have made peace with their fallibility, not because they don't care about excellence, but because they understand that perfectionism is the enemy of presence. When you can make a mistake and remain centered, acknowledge an error without losing your authority, or admit uncertainty while maintaining your leadership, you demonstrate the kind of unshakable self-acceptance that others find both inspiring and stabilizing. This doesn't mean being cavalier about mistakes. It means understanding that your response to imperfection is often more important than the perfection itself. The transformation of your presence ultimately comes down to this: your willingness to inhabit your own life fully. Most people are living slightly outside themselves, observing their experience rather than fully occupying it, analyzing their interactions rather than being present to them, thinking about their next words rather than listening to what's actually happening. Powerful presence emerges when you step fully into the moment, into your body, into your authentic response to whatever life is presenting. This kind of presence is magnetic because it's so rare in our distracted, multitasking, always elsewhere culture. When someone encounters a person who is fully here, fully present, fully alive to the moment, it wakes something up in them. It reminds them of what's possible when we stop performing our lives and start living them. This is your invitation to step into that kind of presence, not as a technique you apply, but as a way of being you embody. Every room you enter from now on is an opportunity to practice this presence. Every conversation is a chance to create the kind of space where others can show up more fully. Every silence is a possibility to deepen rather than fill. Every breath is a chance to anchor yourself more completely in the moment. Your presence is not something you have, it's something you are. And when you fully claim that presence, you don't just change how others see you. You change how they see themselves and what they believe is possible. That's the true power of presence, and it's available to you right now, in this moment, with your very next breath. Speak with purpose, the leader's voice that commands attention. Picture this. You're in a crowded room, dozens of conversations buzzing around you, when suddenly someone speaks and the entire room falls silent. Not because they shouted, not because they demanded attention, but because something in their voice, their words, their presence commanded it naturally. That person has mastered what we're going to unlock together today, the power to speak with purpose. Every great leader throughout history, from Winston Churchill rallying a nation during its darkest hour to Steve Jobs unveiling revolutionary products that changed the world, understood one fundamental truth. Words without purpose are just noise, but words with purpose can move mountains, inspire armies, and transform lives. Today, you're going to discover why most people's words fall flat, how to structure your thoughts so they hit with laser precision, and the exact techniques that separate leaders from followers in every conversation they enter. The clarity revolution: why most communication fails. Let me start with the uncomfortable truth. Right now, in boardrooms across the world, brilliant ideas are dying not because they lack merit, but because they lack clarity. The person presenting them is burying gold mines of insight under mountains of unnecessary words, and their audience, the very people who could champion their vision, are mentally checking out after the first 30 seconds. This isn't just unfortunate, it's tragic. Because when you fail to communicate with clarity, you're not just failing to share an idea, you're failing to create the change that idea could bring to the world. Every rambling presentation, every unfocused pitch, every conversation that meanders without direction is a missed opportunity to lead, to inspire, to make a difference. But here's what most people don't understand. Clarity isn't a natural talent you're born with. It's a skill, a discipline, a choice you make every single time you open your mouth. And the leaders who seem to possess this natural gift, they've simply mastered the frameworks that transform scattered thoughts into powerful, purposeful communication. The first step in this transformation is understanding that your audience, whether it's one person or 1,000, is not a passive recipient of your words. They're active participants in a mental dance, and they're deciding within seconds whether to follow your lead or find another partner. When you speak without structure, you're essentially asking them to dance to music that keeps changing rhythm. They can't follow because they don't know where you're going. The architecture of impact, building your message foundation. Now that you understand why clarity matters, let's talk about how to build it. Think of your next important conversation or presentation as constructing a building. You wouldn't start laying bricks without a blueprint, yet most people approach communication exactly that way. They start talking and hope something coherent emerges. Leaders think differently. Before they speak, they architect their message with 3 non-negotiable components: the foundation, the framework, and the finish. The foundation is your core message, the one thing you want your audience to remember if they forget everything else. This isn't a paragraph, it's a sentence. If you can't distill your main point into a single, powerful sentence, you don't have clarity. You have confusion masquerading as complexity. Once your foundation is solid, you build your framework. This is where most people get lost because they try to say everything at once. Leaders understand that the human mind can only process a limited number of main points before it starts to tune out. The magic number? 3. 3 main pillars that support your foundation. Not 4, not 5, definitely not 7, 3. This isn't arbitrary. It's based on how our brains are wired to process and remember information. But here's where it gets interesting. Within each of these 3 pillars, you're going to use what I call the proof story application method. First, you present your point with concrete proof, data, examples, evidence that makes it undeniable. Then you bring it to life with a story that helps your audience feel the truth of what you're saying. Finally, you give them a specific application, exactly how they can use this insight in their own situation. This framework transforms abstract concepts into concrete action plans. Your audience doesn't just understand what you're saying, they know exactly what to do with it. And that's when communication becomes leadership. The language of leadership, words that move people. Structure alone isn't enough. You need to fill that structure with language that doesn't just inform, it transforms. Most people use what I call passive language, words that describe but don't compel. Leaders use active language, words that create momentum and demand action. Listen to how most people present an idea. I think we should probably consider maybe looking into the possibility of exploring new market opportunities. Count the weak words in that sentence. Think, probably consider, maybe possibility, exploring. Each one is a leak in your leadership presence, allowing doubt and uncertainty to seep into your message. Now listen to how a leader presents the same idea. We will capture new market opportunities. Same concept, completely different energy. The difference isn't just grammatical, it's psychological. Weak language signals weak conviction, and people don't follow uncertain leaders into uncertain futures. But powerful language goes beyond just removing weak words. It's about choosing words that paint pictures in people's minds. Instead of saying improve performance, you say accelerate results. Instead of reduce costs, you say eliminate waste. Instead of consider options, you say seize opportunities. These aren't just semantic differences, they're emotional differences. They change how people feel about what you're proposing, and feelings drive decisions more than facts ever will. The most powerful leaders also understand the principle of verbal precision. They don't just avoid filler words, those ums and ahs that puncture your credibility. They eliminate hedge words that undermine their authority. Words like basically, actually, sort of, kind of, these are confidence killers. Every time you use one, you're essentially telling your audience, I'm not really sure about what I'm saying. The elimination protocol, purging your communication of weakness. Let's get tactical. Right now, you have communication habits that are sabotaging your leadership potential, and most of them are so automatic you don't even realize you're doing them. We're going to identify and eliminate these habits using what I call the elimination protocol. First, we eliminate filler words. These aren't just annoying, they're dangerous. Every is a moment where your audience's attention can drift. Every is a crack in your credibility. But here's the secret most people don't know. Filler words aren't random. They appear in predictable patterns, usually when you're transitioning between ideas or buying time to think. The solution isn't to speak faster or prepare more. It's to embrace strategic pauses. When you feel the urge to say nothing instead. Silence isn't empty space you need to fill. It's a powerful tool that creates emphasis, builds anticipation, and gives your audience time to absorb your most important points. Master the pause, and you master the rhythm of leadership communication. Next, we eliminate qualifier addiction. These are the words and phrases that shrink your authority. I'm not an expert, but this might not work, but I could be wrong, but every qualifier is you giving your audience permission to discount what you're about to say. Leaders don't hedge their bets with language. They state their position clearly and let their ideas stand on their merit. Finally, we eliminate story drift, the tendency to start with one point and end up somewhere completely different. This happens because most people confuse talking with thinking. They use their audience as a sounding board for their thought process instead of presenting their concluded thoughts. Leaders think first, then speak. They know where their sentence is going before they start it, and they take their audience directly there without detours. The three modes of influence: inspire, persuade, direct. Now that you've built a foundation of clarity and eliminated the obstacles to powerful communication, let's talk about the three distinct modes of leadership communication. Every time you speak as a leader, you're operating in one of three modes: inspire, persuade, or direct. Understanding these modes and knowing when to use each one is what separates good communicators from truly influential leaders. When you're in inspire mode, your goal isn't to provide information, it's to create emotion. You're painting a vision of what's possible, helping people see beyond their current circumstances to what they could achieve. Inspirational communication uses what I call elevation language. Words that lift people's thoughts from the mundane to the magnificent. You talk about transformation instead of change, breakthrough instead of improvement, revolution instead of modification. But inspiration without direction is just motivation that fades. That's where persuade mode comes in. When you're persuading, you're building a logical bridge between where people are and where you want them to go. This mode relies on what I call connection language. Words that link benefits to actions, consequences to choices, outcomes to decisions. You're not just telling people what to think, you're showing them why thinking differently will benefit them personally. The third mode, direct, is where many leaders struggle because they confuse being direct with being harsh. Direct communication isn't about being blunt or insensitive. It's about being crystal clear about expectations, timelines, and accountability. When you're in direct mode, You use precision language, words that leave no room for misinterpretation. By Friday instead of soon. Increase by 15% instead of improve significantly. Your responsibility instead of someone should handle this. The key is knowing when to use each mode and how to transition between them smoothly within the same conversation. A powerful leader might inspire their team with a vision, persuade them of the benefits of pursuing it, and then direct them on the specific steps to make it happen, all within the same 10-minute address. The adaptation advantage, reading your audience in real time. Here's where leadership communication becomes an art. The ability to read your audience in real time and adapt your message accordingly. Most people prepare one version of their message and deliver it regardless of how their audience responds. Leaders prepare multiple versions and choose the right one based on what they observe. This skill starts with understanding that every audience brings invisible filters to your conversation. These filters are shaped by their experience, their current challenges, their personality type, and their relationship to you. Your words pass through these filters before they reach their understanding, and those filters can either amplify your message or distort it beyond recognition. The key is learning to recognize filter feedback in real time. When you see glazed eyes, you're probably operating at the wrong level of detail, either too high or too low. When you see heads nodding, but no questions, you might be confirming what they already believe instead of challenging them to think differently. When you see physical resistance, crossed arms, leaning back, distracted behavior, you're encountering an emotional barrier that facts alone won't overcome. Skilled leaders develop what I call adaptive flexibility, the ability to shift their approach mid-conversation based on what they're observing. If your logical argument isn't landing, you shift to storytelling. If your big-picture vision isn't resonating, you zoom in on immediate benefits. If your directive approach is creating resistance, you switch to collaborative language that involves them in finding the solution. This doesn't mean changing your core message. That remains constant. It means changing your delivery method to ensure your message gets through the filters and creates the understanding and action you're seeking. The integration challenge, making this your new default. Everything we've covered today means nothing unless you integrate it into your daily communication habits. The difference between leaders and everyone else isn't that leaders learned these techniques. It's that they made these techniques their default way of communicating. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen by accident. It requires what I call conscious competence, deliberately practicing these skills until they become unconscious habits. For the next 30 days, I want you to choose one technique from today's session and focus on integrating it into every important conversation you have. Maybe it's eliminating filler words from your presentations. Maybe it's structuring every proposal with 3 clear points. Maybe it's adapting your language to match your audience's communication style. Whatever you choose, practice it consciously and consistently until it becomes your new normal. But here's the real challenge. You're going to face resistance. Not just from others, but from yourself. Your old communication habits are comfortable, familiar patterns that your brain prefers because they require less energy. When you start speaking with purpose, structure, and precision, it's going to feel awkward at first. That awkwardness isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're doing something new. Push through that discomfort. On the other side of that awkwardness lies a new version of yourself. Someone whose words carry weight, whose ideas create action, whose presence commands attention not through force, but through the magnetic power of purposeful communication. Conclusion. Your leadership voice awaits. As we conclude, I want you to imagine yourself 6 months from now. You're in that important meeting, that crucial presentation, that career-defining conversation. But this time, something is different. This time, when you speak, people don't just listen, they lean in. Your words don't just inform, they ignite. Your message doesn't just get heard, it gets acted upon. This isn't fantasy. This is the inevitable result of speaking with purpose. Every leader who has ever moved people, motivated teams, or changed organizations started exactly where you are right now, with the decision to communicate differently. The techniques you've learned today aren't just communication skills, they're leadership tools. They're the difference between having good ideas and having good ideas that change the world. They're the bridge between being heard and being followed. Your voice has the power to inspire, to persuade, to direct. It has the power to cut through the noise of endless meetings and meaningless conversations to deliver messages that matter, that motivate, that move people to action. But that power lies dormant until you choose to activate it. Until you decide that your words, your ideas, your vision, your leadership deserve to be delivered with the clarity, structure, and impact that will ensure they're not just heard but acted upon. The question isn't whether you have something important to say. You do. The question is whether you'll say it with the purpose, power, and precision that will ensure it creates the change you envision. Your leadership voice is waiting. It's time to let it speak. Chapter 3: Influence with Emotional Intelligence. The leader's secret weapon. Introduction: the power paradox. Picture this. You're in a boardroom. Two leaders present the exact same proposal. One speaks with authority, demands compliance, and uses positional power to push their agenda. The other speaks with conviction, connects emotionally with their audience, and invites collaboration. Guess which one actually gets results? If you guess the second leader, you've just witnessed the fundamental truth we're exploring today. True leadership isn't about the volume of your voice. It's about the depth of your connection. Welcome to a journey that will transform how you think about influence forever. Today, we're diving deep into Chapter 3 of Leadership Mastery, Influence with Emotional Intelligence. For the next 20 minutes, I want you to forget everything you think you know about leadership and prepare to discover why the most powerful leaders in history weren't the loudest in the room. They were the most emotionally intelligent. The Connection Revolution: Why Dominance is Dead. Here's what nobody tells you about leadership in the 21st century. Dominance is not just outdated, it's counterproductive. The old model of leadership, built on hierarchy and fear, is crumbling before our eyes. Why? Because today's world demands something entirely different. We live in an age where information flows freely, where collaboration trumps competition, and where people crave authentic connection more than blind obedience. Think about the leaders who've inspired you most in your life. I guarantee they weren't the ones who barked orders or wielded authority like a weapon. They were the ones who made you feel seen, heard, and valued. They were the ones who understood that influence isn't about making people do what you want. It's about making them want what you want. This shift from dominance to connection isn't just a nice philosophical idea. It's a strategic imperative for anyone who wants to lead effectively in today's interconnected world. But here's where it gets interesting. This connection doesn't happen by accident. It's built on a foundation of emotional intelligence that most people never develop. The leaders who master this art don't just stumble into success. They deliberately cultivate skills that allow them to read, understand, and influence the emotional landscape of every interaction. The psychology of words, your secret influence arsenal. Every word you speak carries an emotional charge. Every sentence you construct either builds bridges or burns them. This is a motivational fluff. This is neuroscience. When you speak, you're not just transmitting information. You're literally rewiring the brains of everyone listening. The words you choose trigger neurochemical reactions that can inspire confidence or instill doubt, create trust or breed suspicion, motivate action or paralyze with fear. Consider this. When you say, "We need to fix this problem," you've just activated threat detection systems in your listeners' brains. But when you say, "We have an opportunity to improve this situation," you've triggered their reward systems instead. Same situation, completely different neurological response. This is the psychology of words and action, and it's happening in every single conversation you have. The most emotionally intelligent leaders understand this power and wield it with precision. They know that their words are tools of transformation, not just vehicles for information transfer. They choose language that elevates rather than diminishes, that includes rather than excludes, that empowers rather than controls. When you master the psychology of words, you don't just communicate, you create experiences that move people at the deepest level. The listening revolution. hearing beyond words. But here's where most aspiring leaders get it completely wrong. They focus so much on what they're saying that they forget the most powerful tool in their arsenal: listening. Not the passive, waiting for your turn to speak kind of listening that dominates most conversations. I'm talking about the transformational, soul-deep listening that makes people feel truly understood. When you truly listen to someone, something magical happens. You don't just hear their words. You hear their fears, their hopes, their unspoken needs, and their hidden motivations. You begin to understand not just what they're saying, but why they're saying it. This level of listening is like having a superpower in leadership because it allows you to address not just surface concerns, but the emotional undercurrents that actually drive behavior. The art of listening goes far beyond staying quiet while someone talks. It's about listening with your entire being, your eyes, your posture, your energy. It's about creating a space so safe and receptive that people feel compelled to share their deepest truths with you. When you master this skill, people don't just hear you, they trust you. And trust, my friends, is the ultimate currency of influence. Reading the room, the emotional GPS of leadership. Imagine having an internal GPS that could guide you through any social or professional situation. That's exactly what emotional room reading skills provide. The ability to sense the unspoken dynamics, to feel the emotional temperature, to detect the subtle shifts in energy that signal opportunity or danger. This is what separates good leaders from great ones. Reading the room isn't about being psychic. It's about being present. It's about noticing the micro expressions that flash across faces, the subtle changes in posture, the energy shifts that happen when certain topics are introduced. It's about recognizing when enthusiasm is genuine versus polite, when agreement is authentic versus compliant, when silence signals contemplation versus resistance. Master room readers understand that every group has an emotional rhythm, and successful leadership means harmonizing with that rhythm rather than fighting against it. They know when to push and when to pause, when to challenge and when to support, when to speak and when to create space for others. This emotional attunement allows them to guide conversations and meetings with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony. Empathy as strategy, the competitive advantage nobody talks about. Let's destroy a dangerous myth right now. Empathy is not weakness. Empathy is strategy. It's the ultimate competitive advantage in a world where everyone has access to the same information, the same technologies, and often the same resources. What differentiates exceptional leaders is their ability to understand, connect with, and motivate the human beings who will execute their vision. When you lead with empathy, you don't just understand what your team needs. You anticipate it. You don't just respond to concerns. You prevent them. You don't just manage people. You inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. This isn't about being soft or permissive. It's about being strategically human in a way that creates unprecedented levels of engagement and performance. The most successful leaders in every industry share this common trait. They see empathy as a skill to be developed, not a nice-to-have personality trait. They practice perspective-taking like athletes practice their sport. They study human motivation like scientists study data. They invest in understanding people because they know that business success is ultimately human success. The action catalyst, moving from connection to results. But here's where the rubber meets the road. All the emotional intelligence in the world means nothing if it doesn't translate into action. The ultimate goal of emotionally intelligent leadership isn't just to make people feel good. It's to inspire them to do great things. This is where connection becomes catalyst, where understanding transforms into momentum. The secret lies in understanding that people don't resist change. They resist being changed. When you approach leadership through emotional intelligence, you're not pushing people toward action. You're helping them discover their own reasons for moving. You're not selling them on your vision. You're helping them see how your vision aligns with their deepest values and aspirations. This approach to motivation is infinitely more powerful than traditional command and control methods because it taps into intrinsic motivation rather than relying on external pressure. When people choose to act based on their own internal drive, they don't just comply, they commit. They don't just participate, they own the outcome. The conversation architecture, building bridges with words. Every conversation you have as a leader is an opportunity to build or break trust, to create clarity or confusion, to inspire action or breed complacency. The most emotionally intelligent leaders approach conversations like architects approach buildings, with intentionality, structure, and a clear vision of the desired outcome. This doesn't mean manipulation or calculated insincerity. It means being purposeful about creating conversations that serve everyone involved. It means opening with connection before diving into content, acknowledging emotions before addressing logic, and always looking for win-win outcomes that honor everyone's needs and aspirations. When you master conversation architecture, every interaction becomes a bridge-building opportunity. You learn to navigate difficult topics with grace, to deliver challenging feedback with compassion, and to inspire action through invitation rather than demand. This skill alone can transform your leadership effectiveness and create the kind of workplace culture where people thrive. Your emotional intelligence toolkit, practical mastery. Now, let's get practical. Emotional intelligence isn't just a concept. It's a toolkit of specific, learnable skills. The first tool is emotional self-awareness, the ability to recognize and understand your own emotional states in real time. When you know what you're feeling and why, you can choose how to respond rather than simply react. The second tool is emotional regulation, the skill of managing your emotional responses in ways that serve your leadership goals. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means channeling them productively. Anger can become passion for change. Frustration can become fuel for innovation. Fear can become cautious wisdom. The third tool is social awareness, the ability to read the emotional states of others accurately. This skill allows you to adjust your approach in real time, to provide exactly what people need in each moment, and to navigate group dynamics with finesse. The leadership legacy, your emotional ripple effect. Here's something profound to consider. Every emotionally intelligent interaction you have creates ripples that extend far beyond that moment. When you lead with emotional intelligence, you don't just influence the immediate outcome. You model a way of being that others adopt and spread. You become a catalyst for cultural transformation that can impact generations of leaders. Think about the leaders who shaped you. Their influence didn't end when the conversation ended or when you left their organization. Their approach to leadership became part of your leadership DNA. This is the true power of emotional intelligence. It's not just about what you accomplish, it's about who you develop in the process. When you commit to leading through emotional intelligence, you're not just improving your own effectiveness. You're contributing to a more human, more connected, more emotionally intelligent world. You're proving that success doesn't require sacrificing humanity, that strength includes vulnerability, and that the best leaders are those who help others become leaders themselves. Your journey toward emotionally intelligent leadership starts with your very next interaction. Will you choose to dominate or connect? Will you speak to be heard or to understand? Will you use your words as weapons or as bridges? The choice is yours, and the impact of that choice will echo through every life you touch and every organization you lead. Remember, great leadership is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about making everyone else in the room feel smarter. It's not about having all the answers. It's about asking the questions that help others discover their own solutions. It's not about being perfect. It's about being perfectly human in your pursuit of excellence. The world needs leaders who understand that the heart of leadership isn't found in corner offices or organizational charts. It's found in the space between human beings where understanding meets action and where connection becomes the catalyst for extraordinary results. I hope this gave you something to think about today. Dr. Julian Vance has been with you all the way. And always remember, keep learning, keep pushing forward. Who stops reading, stops growing.